Now we're good.
We're good.
Just
All right.
thumbs up.
Worship Center, we love you. We're glad that you're here with us this morning. Unfortunately, you don't have David, Al, or Mike. You're stuck with us. But we're going to try to bring you a word this morning. And we are personally just blessed to be able to share with you. I want to take a quick second while I have this platform to say thank you to all of our Forever family and everybody that's prayed for me and my family during this whole surgery process and everything. I mean, huge support. Your prayers were heard and felt, and cannot be more grateful for you. And we're starting to get back to normal, or as close to normal as I can. Those of y'all that know me well know that there's nothing normal really about me. There never really was. And so we're going to try to get back to whatever that baseline is. And also, you know, I've been up on a Sunday morning a few times, but this is my brother Derek's first time. And why do you look so, are you nervous, Derek?
I'm all right. I'm gonna make it. We got this. God's got this.
Hey, look, listen to me. Look, I'm gonna give you something that I heard works really well.
What you got?
Okay, I want you to just close your eyes real quick.
You sure?
Just close them. It's cool. I promise. Yes, sir. Close your eyes. All right, take in a big, deep breath. All right. Now I want you to just imagine that you're like Adam in the garden, completely vulnerable, open, concealing nothing.
Stop.
Yeah.
Stop. Just stop.
What?
You know, for a licensed counselor, that is horrible advice. Horrible, right? Am I right? No, I'm good. Are y'all good? I mean, look at this. I mean, we have a Forever family over there in the worship center. Not only that, we're in a special room to both of us. You know, I personally, Jesus used them doors to help save my life. And then I married the love of my life right here in this spot, in this room. And I think you were a part of that.
I was here. I remember.
And look, this is our people, man. Here and over there. I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Are you?
Yep, ready to go.
I'll tell you what, why don't we get somebody up here that is probably a little bit more grown up than both of us combined?
That sounds like a plan.
We have a
and more
fantastic
maturity.
Scripture reader this morning. Callie, would you
come on up
here? Share with us.
You know, Callie is a big part of our landing ministry on Friday night, but it also says here, Callie, that you like skateboarding, art, and math, that you're actually kind of a math whiz. Is that correct? Also, that you're in student council and that you love to talk a little bit. Bryan, y'all got a lot in common. Well, go ahead, Callie. What we got this morning?
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3.
Thank you, Callie.
Great work, Callie. Callie got baptized not too long ago.
Yeah.
So, guys, we're going to be introducing this sermon series to you all. For the next 8 weeks, we're going to be going on the Beatitudes, Jesus' teaching, and the title of this series is We're All in Recovery.
That's right. So there is, though, always kind of a common misconception when it comes to recovery. One of the common misconceptions is that God doesn't need to be in recovery, but we're not going to go into all that. I think everybody here especially knows God needs to be in everything. But the other common misconception is that we may not need recovery, right? We thinking that recovery is only for major events in life, like a drug addiction or alcoholism, gambling, and that list goes on and on and on. But that's a misconception because they're not just for those people. They're for every single person who has ever walked the face of the earth. Because our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, they come in many forms, right? It could be as depression. It could be overworking, right? It could be a Facebook addiction. It could be overeating. It could be fear, anxiety, some type of trauma that you had no control over with at a younger age, and that is going to cause you to be in recovery of something. But even if none of those, and that list I'm telling you is a mile long, we don't even have enough time to cover it. If none of those even apply to you, there is one thing that applies to each and every one of us here today. And that's the spiritual warfare that we're all in. See, we all need to be in recovery of the flesh that's inside of us, that sinful nature that we're born with. And these recovery principles need to be worked by every single one of us as followers of Christ and those who are disciples of Jesus Christ. And that's what we're going to do over this next series is we're going to break down the 8 principles that we have a part of the Beatitudes and Celebrate Recovery. So we're going to take each week and we're going to break down one of those principles for you guys. And today we're going to be in principle 1. But before we do that, I want to kind of just overview the whole series, right? We're going to break these down individually, but just once we go through each step in each principle, I hope by the time we get done with that, you're going to say, wow, I really do need these principles and these steps. So principle 1, right, it goes along with our step 1 in Celebrate Recovery, which we'll cover today, is you have to realize I'm not God, right? Every one of us that walks the face of the earth in every situation, we need to realize that we're not God in that situation, especially if we want to have the power to recover from whatever that is. And that's where we have to admit that we're powerless and that our lives are unmanageable. Because when God isn't first and we try to play God in every situation, then that's when just life starts to fall apart. When we try to do what God needs to be doing for us. And then that moves on to principle 2, right? That we came to believe that Jesus, that God could restore us to sanity, right? That we openly and know that he exists and he's going to be the one that helps us in all situations. That's the gospel. That's when we hear the gospel for the first time and believe that Jesus came, he died for us on that cross, he rose out of that tomb, he ascended, he's sitting there at the right hand of the Father, and he's coming back for us. We have to know that he's there, and we earnestly believe that he exists. That's all of us. And then we move into principle 3 and step 3, right? We commit our lives and our will over to God. Now, that's all of us in this room. That committing your life, of course, to Jesus is a one-time, or, when we were baptized into his name. But that committing your will over to God, that's an everyday that we all must do as followers of Christ. Every day I got to wake up, I got to bear my cross, I got to crucify myself and begin to walk in the will of the Father. And that takes work. It takes an everyday in and out because Lord knows both of us will be the first to tell you we're going to fall short. We're going to fall short each and every time, and there's going to be times in our lives where something comes up that we're not going to honor God the way we should be. But we need to realize that and be able to wake up the next morning and say, Lord, today is yours. All right, then that moves us over to our next principle, which will be principle 4, which is steps 4 and 5. Now listen to this. Step 4 is that we take a fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Now we all must do that because whether you're in a recovery from a major addiction or if it's something just fear, depression, or something that happened to you as far as trauma, we all must walk through that fearless moral inventory. Because it's there where we realize these fears and these character defects that Satan is using against us. And a lot of times we don't even know that they're there. I tell them all the time, it's like the war on terrorism. We're the biggest military force the world has. But yet we couldn't really win the war on terrorism because we couldn't see who we're fighting. We couldn't recognize the enemy. And that's what a step 4, a moral inventory does. It allows us to look within ourselves and see what it is there that the enemy's using against us so we can combat the spiritual warfare and the enemy that's facing us. And then we go into confessing those sins, right? James 5:16 in step 5, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. Every single one of us as followers of Christ need to do that and be together in that, not hold that in so we're constantly having that weight of the sin and sinful nature on our shoulders. And then steps 6 and 7, right? Know that we have these character defects. Know that we're broken. And then become ready to have God remove those. So once we clear this out, we can be able to be used by the Holy Spirit. And then steps 8 and 9, right? All of us have wronged somebody in our past. It's realizing that we have done that we leave our gift at the altar and then go be reconciled to that brother and sister. Make those amends. Get right with our fellowship and brothers and sisters. All of us need to do that as followers of Christ. And then, of course, you have step 10 and 11, right? Every day we need to look within ourselves. Where did we fall short? Where did we not honor God with our daily inventory? Where did we maybe act in unforgiveness? Or where did we maybe speak out of character? Every day we need to look within and then continue that conscious contact with God through prayer and meditation. And then, of course, principle 8, for all of us as disciples of Jesus Christ, we are to carry this message by our actions and by our words. That's every single person here that loves Jesus. We are called to be disciples and to carry that message to everyone.
Yeah, so what we're going to be doing here through this series is really just kind of challenging the way that we think. Because in a lot of ways, recovery is about looking inwardly, right? As Derek was talking about step 4, I couldn't help but think it's like take a fearless moral inventory of ourselves, right? I think a lot of times we get really good at taking inventory of other people, but through the next 8 weeks, we're going to be looking inward and taking inventory on ourselves and just walking through this process. So in that, we're going to look at our first principle in the RM recovery, right? And I want everybody to say this with me, right? First things first. First things first. We have this thing that we do at Celebrate Recovery, and I want to do that together with everybody this morning because let's face it, all of you are now attending Celebrate Recovery. And yeah. And look, for all of our newcomers, my CR people, you're going to have to lead the charge on this. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the principle up on the screen, and we're going to read the principle and the verse. All right? 1, 2, 3. Realize I'm not God. I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing, and my life is unmanageable. Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor. Matthew 5:3. That was wonderful. I mean, come on, give yourselves a hand there. I mean, who said you couldn't do CR on Sunday mornings, right? I want to key in on a few phrases here. The first one is realize I'm not God. I love how we see this first thing first language in the process of change. Like Derek just explained, we're all in recovery. So no matter what hurt, habit, or hang up, the absolute first response is an end to ourselves, right? Now we hear this and most of us are naturally like, well, duh, Bryan, I know I'm not God, right? Like, man, I realize I'm not God every day. But then you got to go to the second term that I want to key in on, admit that I am powerless. Right? See, I think it's one thing to admit or realize I'm not God. It's another thing to admit that I'm powerless in that. Because I can't tell you how many people I know that'll say right here to my face, hey, Bryan, look, I know God is God and I'm not him, but then try to have power and control of most things in their life. So realize I'm not God and then admit that I am powerless. That means that I have to understand I am not the author and perfecter of things and that I am powerless when it comes to my freedom. How many of us in here could save ourselves from our sin? None. 0, right? We needed Christ for that. So I'm powerless whenever it comes to my freedom. There's a lot of worldly people that'll tell you something different. The spirit of our age tells us to express yourself, believe in yourself. We're all about self-reliance, self-sufficiency, self-confidence, and so on. However, that's not really what God says, and that's not what Jesus taught. Jesus said in our text this morning, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now we hear that, and it's a little bit of a conundrum. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to be rich in mercy and have things. So are you saying I need to be poor? We often get tripped up on that word poor because we quickly associate it to material lack. But in Scripture and in the Old Testament, poor doesn't necessarily mean physical poverty. It's often a technical term for those who realize that at bottom they need God for everything. Physical and spiritual, right? Man, doesn't it ever just trip you up sometimes? Like, you go through life, you got people that are, man, on fire for Christ and everything, but then in every single aspect, they trying to run the show.
Absolutely.
I mean, we all get caught up in it at times. Mm-hmm. It's like, man, we'll get in this thing and we're like, you know what? God, I need you. I'm powerless. Just help me get through this thing. And then as soon as we get on the other side of that burden and it becomes a blessing, all of a sudden we ask God to sit on the sidelines because I got this. And I think God is perpetually trying to work us out of self-reliance and putting him on the sideline and instead letting him be in control 100% of the time. It's not like God calls us to deal with some level of adversity with him and then says, you know what, from here on out, you just do it by yourself, bud. Doesn't really work that way. Isaiah talks in 61:1, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me because the good Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, right? I think that before something can rise, it must fall. And in our principle, that's what Jesus is teaching us. Before we rise, we must fall and no longer be self-reliant. Jesus said, truly, truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit, in John 12:24. A death to ourself. First things first, come to the end of yourself, admit you're powerless. That is required to inherit the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. So before I live, I must first die. Right? Y'all probably heard me say this before, but like Christ didn't come and die on a cross to make bad people good. He came to make dead people alive. And the oxymoronic thing for us to try to wrap our minds around a lot of time is that in order for me to live fully and to have life abundantly, John 10:10, I must first die to myself, which means I'm not going to be the solution. Matter of fact, I won't even be part of the solution. Christ is, always will be, and always has been the solution. Being poor in spirit is about giving God a proper attitude towards him. We are bankrupt before God. Knowing this about ourselves, we cry for mercy to the only one who can wipe our debt and be our supply. Before we can go forward, we have to get there, or else we will try to manage things. So this last phrase in the principle, our lives are unmanageable. When we try to rely on our own power, our own strength, not realizing that he is the source, he is God, and I am not, things just tend to become unmanageable. You can always tell when somebody's trying to manage things in their life and whenever they're relying on their own power. You know how I can tell that? It's because they're tired and frustrated, right? And so it's kind of like the guy, he goes, there's this old guy, he goes into a hardware store and he chops wood a lot, right? He's cutting up wood, he takes care of wood, he does stuff with wood, that's just what he does. He's done it for a long time. And so he decides, man, I'm getting older, I need to have a better way of accomplishing the goal of stacking up wood. And so he goes to a hardware store, he walks up to the sales associate and he's like, hey man, I need to stack more wood. He said, don't worry, bro, I got you, right? And so he goes, this right here, man, you'll be able to do 3 times the amount of wood that you've ever done with your old handsaw. And the old guy's like, yeah, you know what? I need that. And so he gets it, he goes home, and he commences to working on wood. And then as he's there, he realizes, man, my hands are killing me. I'm tired. I'm not getting half the work done that I used to get done. He said, man, I do a whole cord of wood. Now I can't even do a cord of wood, right? He can't get the wood done. And so he's like, you know what, man, I'm going back up to the hardware store. So he goes back to the hardware store. He walks in, he walks up to the same associate, and he says, man, this thing's a piece of junk, okay? You really sold me on a dream here because I've been using this thing all week, and I'm not even doing half the amount of wood that I normally would do. And the sales associate's like, sir, I just really don't know how that's possible. Right? He's like, well, look, kid, I'm telling you. And he goes, well, look, I'll tell you what. We got some wood out back. Let's just take it out there and see what's going on. So the associate and the guy walks out back. They get back there. The associate sets it on the ground. He pulls the cord, and the chainsaw comes to life. Just a loud roar. And the old guy stands back. He looks at him crazy, and he says, wait a minute. That's how that thing works? He's like, man, so you're telling me I had to crank it up, turn it on, press this button, and the chain will move? See, this guy was relying on the only thing that he knew how to do, and he was working it like his old handsaw. And guess what? His hands are getting tired. He's getting restless, irritable, frustrated. Too many times we don't rely on the power that we have access to because we're relying on the things that we understand. Right. And so I think that whenever we try to manage things and we rely on the things that we can understand, the things that we can fathom, we're not getting nearly the amount done that we could be getting done when we were relying on His strength. And we're just growing more and more frustrated.
Now, Bryan, just real quick before moving to the next point. Now, that guy in the story wasn't you and the store owner, Kaylee, the first time you were trying to split wood and children, were you?
No. It wasn't because
okay.
I didn't buy a chainsaw. Okay. I just borrowed one from Colin and never gave it back.
Good stuff. But that's what principle 1 is all about, right? It's being powerless and knowing that you are powerless in every situation. It's I can't, but He can in every situation. When I think of principle 1, I can't help but to think of a story found in 3 of the 4 Gospels. It's found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And many of you may know this. It's this lady who suffered with this bleeding condition for so long, for 12 years of her life. It's such a powerful story, though, of one realizing that I'm powerless and realizing that I can't and He can. So we're going to read this account. We're going to look at this account this morning. So if y'all would, open your Bibles to Mark chapter 5. We're going to read this account found in Mark. So just as y'all are getting to Mark 5, just kind of where Jesus is at, as we get to this story, he has just crossed the sea. He is now on his way for another healing, another miracle, as a synagogue leader, Jairus, has asked him to come heal his daughter, which eventually arises from the dead. But he's now on the way when this account that we're going to read about happens. So Mark chapter 5, we're going to pick up in verse 24. It says, so Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had suffered subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I could just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt her body, and she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized the power had gone out from him. He turned around the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? You see the people in the crowd against you, his disciples answered, and yet you ask, who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. What a powerful recovery story we read here in Mark chapter 5. I just think about this poor lady now, waking up every day for 12 years. Over 4,380 mornings and days, she woke up and everything inside of her wanted to be freed from this condition. Full of pain, full of not knowing how she's going to get through the day, every day. And not only that, we know that from Jewish law, right, she would be declared unclean. Leviticus 15:25 through 27 would state that she couldn't even be around anybody. She couldn't go worship God in the temple. She couldn't be around anybody and close friends or anybody that's in her community, because if she would so happen to touch them, then they would be ceremonially unclean, and they would have to isolate for 7 days. I mean, even if she was married, if she had a husband, they couldn't even have no relationship together because of this condition that she had. She would be completely isolated from society, which is exactly kind of what all of our hurts, habits, and hang-ups does to this day. It may not be a law that states we have to, but when we're struggling with these hurts, habits, and hang-ups, it does begin to isolate us from our families, from our friends, from, of course, God himself, because the enemy wants us to say that we're better alone, and it begins to take us away from everything God has right in front of us, just as this lady did. And this lady, too, as it says, tried everything in her power to be healed. Right? She went to every doctor that she can think of, only for this matter to get worse. You know, if she was living today, I'm sure she would have tried all the diets they had, all the self-help books. I mean, she literally was trying everything that she could possibly find, think, or do to be healed from this condition. You know, this story here is so close to my heart because I can totally relate to what this lady must have been going through. You know, for 14 years, I struggled with substance abuse. And I, too, would wake up every day praying, hoping, and believing that today will be the last day. Today, I'm not going to give in to my addiction. But time and time again, over and over again, because I was relying on my own power, I could never succeed. I think 3 or 4 days would be the only amount of time that I could succeed on my own power. You know, that's all of us in every situation. Now, all these things and medicines and health and diets are great, but if that's number one priority, if that's what you're going to first to try to help you with your condition, then you're missing the point. Jesus has to be first when we are dealing with any type of condition. And that's what changed for her, right? The moment that she realized that nothing this world, nothing society had to offer could heal her, her whole life changed. That's when she found the humility and she dropped to her knees and said, if I could just touch his clothes. Verse 27 and 28. I love this. This is the moment of her powerlessness that changed the rest of her life. It says, when she heard about Jesus, she came up from behind him in the crowd and touched his clothes because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. That is where we all need to be. Get to that point of humility and powerlessness that the world is there and they have a lot to offer, but it's not what I need. I need to hit my knees and touch his garment. And that needs to be the first priority when it comes to my suffering, when it comes to my life being unmanageable. You know, it's the same thing for me. My life didn't change for 14 years until I hit my knees in that place in Baton Rouge and called upon my Father in heaven for the first time. And that's where we need to be, just as this lady, on our knees, realizing we're powerless in every circumstance. Because we all, like we talked about earlier, we recover. We're all in recovery, and we recover from so many different things. I do want to make it clear, too, that there is sometimes, though, in God's will, that some physical ailments, don't say that right? Help me out.
You're asking the wrong guy. I don't say stuff right.
Y'all know what I'm talking about. Are not healed, right? I don't know why. His thoughts are above my thoughts. His ways are above my ways. But we still need to realize that we are powerless in that circumstance. That he is doing something for his greater good and that he is still going to do something through us. Even if we don't get that physical healing, we'll get that emotional healing. We will be closer to him than we've ever been before. There's 2 of my dear friends that come to mind. Many of y'all may know them, that are thinking about this right here, right now, that are going through this moment right here, right now. You know, but Lynn and Lee have walked this out. And although they may not have got the physical healing right now, what they're doing in their faith and their continuance to remain powerless and honor God through their worship is helped changing, I know, my faith and so many more. And God is doing so much through them, through their storm. So just know that God's doing everything. We may not know the answers. We may not get the physical healing, but he is working in many ways. You know, in 2 Corinthians, Paul kind of backs this up when he's pleading to have this thorn removed from her flesh over and over. But God says, I'm not going to remove it. It's there. In 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. This is principle 1 in a nutshell. We have to remain weak. We're not going to always understand what God's doing, but we must remain powerless and allow his power to work through us.
Yeah, that is a beautiful story of, you know, what God can do and his power in admitting our powerlessness. I couldn't help but think about just how blessed people are who know the feeling of desperation. Desperation is the doorway that breakthrough walks through. And so sometimes I think it's easier for us to live out this principle whenever we're desperately broken. When you have an illness, or when you've burned every bridge, when you've tried everything that you possibly can, I think that that's what gets you there, is being just that broken and desperate, that you get to the point where you realize I'm not God and I'm powerless. and my life is unmanageable. And that's why we consider those people blessed. Because, look, you've reached the end of yourself through that desperation. But, like we said, we're all in recovery. So how do I walk this out if I don't feel desperately broken today? Now, there's always going to be things that happen in life. There's always going to be moments that bring you to that I need God. But sometimes we're just walking it out and we don't feel desperate. I think the best way to walk out this principle whenever you don't necessarily feel desperately broken, I would say that humility is required. Not just the actions of humility, but a humble heart. We must humble ourselves before the Lord to let His goodness guide us, direct us, and give us strength. Step out of the denial that I have it all figured out, or the I got this mentality, and just trust Him. Just because you're not desperately broken doesn't mean that you don't need God's guidance, okay? I think sometimes it's like I said a minute ago, we're trying to actively work ourselves to a point where, you know what, we could tell God to take a break. And I think God is actively working against that mentality on a regular basis. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. Now, we've all heard this greatly quoted time and time again. But you know what? Sometimes it's just hard for us to do. When we're not desperately broken, we lean on our own understanding a lot. We have to, in all of our ways, submit to Him, humble ourselves to Him, realize I'm not God, and He will make our lives straight. I used to do this exercise with clients all the time. So for some of y'all that don't know, I worked as an addiction counselor for a long time. It's probably why our Celebrate Recovery has grown, because I did a very bad job at it.
According to that advice you gave me earlier, that may be
that's
true.
right, yeah. But I used to do this exercise with clients, and what I would do is that we'd be in group therapy, and I'd get one of the clients, and I'd have him stand just at one side of the room, and then we'd take a bunch of chairs and stuff and just junk and throw it all on the floor, right? I mean, just get piles of stuff everywhere. And then I'd say, all right, man, this is what I need you to do. I need you to walk through all of these obstacles and open the door. And he'd be like, okay, no problem. And I'd be like, wait, hold on. But first, and I'd take a blindfold and I'd put it over his eyes, right? And I'd say, now, I need you to walk through all these obstacles and open the door. But if you hit anything, then you have to turn around and start over. And then he'd be like, well, what am I supposed to do, Bryan? And I'm like, well, look, here you go. Look. And I'd get another client and I'd have him come up and stand next to him. I'd say, look, you have to guide him through this path. And if he touches anything, he has to start over. Now, you can't put your hands on him, and you can only use your words to explain where he should step and where he shouldn't step, right? And he's like, no problem. People love a challenge, right? And so he's like, no problem, all right, I'll do that. And so he starts guiding them, right? And then I'd tell everybody else, all the other clients and anybody that's in the room, I'd say, I want y'all to be as distracting as possible. So make a bunch of noise. And then they'd start banging on walls. They're getting loud, obnoxious. And meanwhile, this guy's standing there and he's trying to walk him through this obstacle course. And they start making some forward progress. He starts navigating them. He's listening to the words of the guy that he should be listening to. And then what I would do is I would walk up and I'd tell him in his ear, I'd be like, hey, turn left. And then he'd turn left and run into something. You have to start back over. And I'd tell him, I said, hey, I told you to listen to his voice, not my voice. You see, I think that most of us, without even knowing it, are flying through life blind, okay? And we have this grand illusion that we can navigate life without the voice of God directing and guiding us. But too many times we get caught up in all the distractions, all the things that are intentionally in our life to help us not be able to hear His guidance. And then sometimes the enemy comes up specifically with the wrong direction to run you right into an obstacle you was never meant to run into. And I think that in a lot of ways, we got to apply that type of mindset and walk this out. And that takes humility. It takes humility to be able to say, you know what? I'm truly flying blind here. Maybe I can't see everything the way that I think I can see it. Maybe I have a successful business. Maybe I've done some great things. And all of a sudden, we start believing that we're not wearing this blindfold through life. I think that is a scheme of the enemy. Because we got to rely on God and His guidance to direct us through the obstacles. And if we don't, guess what? We're going to run into the wrong things. We have to humbly admit that we are powerless, and if we admit that we are powerless, then you need to be powerless, right? I used to say this to clients all the time. They'd be like, Bryan, I'm powerless. My life is unmanageable, but this is what I need. I said, whoa, calm down. You can't be powerless and unmanageable and then tell me exactly how to fix you. You know what I'm saying? It don't work that way, right? We can't realize I'm not God. Say, God, I need you. I'm flying blind. I need you to walk me through this. And then say, but this is exactly what I need, God. Don't really work like that. We have to be powerless. So as we go through this series titled, We're All in Recovery, I want you to just kind of, again, take the challenge, right? Just us as a forever family to really walk through this recovery process. I promise you, God will reveal some things to you that you need to work through. He will reveal some things to you that you need to change and that is holding you back from living in the fullness of what He has for you. Because we're all recovering from something. We can't save ourselves. First things first, I got to realize I'm not God and I am powerless towards my tendency to do the wrong thing and that my life can become unmanageable. That we can't do it, but He can.
That's right.
And that humility is required, and we got to fully trust in Him. I want to tell you a quick story about Mark and Susan. So Mark and Susan got married, and they were married for a couple of years, and then Susan started going blind, and she completely lost her eyesight very quickly. And so Mark says, hey, you know what? No problem. We're going to work through this, right? And so he starts working with her. He starts being there for her and helping her. And she's like, look, I got to work. And so he says, look, I'm going to help you learn how to do your job, right? And so he starts working with her, showing her how to get to her job, navigate through riding the bus, everything like that. And then he says, look, I got to get to work sooner because I'm losing too much time at work. And he worked at a military base. He was a military guy. And she says, well, I can't do this. I can't ride the bus. I can't walk my way across the street. I can't get up to my office and do my job. And he says, no, it's okay. I'm gonna teach you. I'm gonna help you and I'm gonna guide you through that, right? So over the next several weeks, Mark's there with Susan and he's helping her and he's guiding her through it. And they're navigating the bus, getting off the bus, where to walk, how to cross the street, how to get to her office building, walk up the steps of her office building, get into her office, and do her job. And then Mark says, okay, I got to get back to work. I can't do this for you in the morning no more. And so she's scared. But that Monday she starts. She gets on the bus. She navigates it beautifully. She gets off the bus, she walks across the street, walks down the sidewalk, walks up the stairs, goes into her office. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, she does this flawlessly. And then on Friday, she gets on the bus, and the guy driving the bus tells her, hey, you know what? You're a blessed woman. She says, stop it. I'm a blind woman. And he says, well, yes, ma'am. But every day when you get off of this bus, there's a guy in a military uniform standing on the sidewalk over there. And as you walk off this bus, he's watching you like a hawk. And as you walk down the sidewalk, he doesn't take his eyes off of you. He watches you the entire time. And then as you walk across the street, he's just watching you like a hawk. He watches you as you go up the steps to your office building, and whenever you unlock the door and walk inside, he stands there for a minute to make sure that you're okay. And then he gives a salute and he blows you a kiss. And then Susan realizes, that's my husband. He was watching me the whole time. You see, I think that is a beautiful picture of what God does for us. See, we get this thing. We get in this moment of powerlessness and desperation. We get in this place of hurt. And then all of a sudden it becomes evident to us that we are blind and that we need somebody to guide us. And we don't know how we're going to do it. But God says, you know what? I'm going to stay with you and I'm going to teach you. And I'm going to guide you through this. And I'm going to help you through this. And then once he does that, he says, okay, now I need you to walk. And we may start to feel like all of a sudden we're in it alone, but he's not. He's standing by and he's watching, making sure that we're safe as we accomplish the thing that he has called us to. That's not only a picture of what God does for us, but that's a picture of what we're supposed to do for one another.
Right.
That's a picture.
Go ahead.
No. Go.
I was going to say, we're all in this together. And I hope that's one of the main points that you took from the opening sermon today, is that we're not alone. God is with us, and we're going to walk this out together. So if you come in today and you realize there was something that you are holding power over, there's something that you won't release to God or that you need to release to God, or if there's any more struggle that you have or any struggle that you're struggling with, please come while we stand and sing and let us pray with you and walk through this journey with you. Thank you.